I honestly had planned to talk about this later on, but given that J. Cole is about to drop a new album, I wanted to do at least my part in making sure we listen to J. Cole correctly without being fooled by any of his bullshit. So here I go. J. Cole is a bitch, but I think too many people, including his own fans, aren't seeing it. It wasn't about his diss to Kendrick or the apology. Based on everything that I've seen in how he presents himself, it's pretty clear to me that he's a bitch. One that is deeply confused about himself because he's in denial about his true feelings. But because so few seem to really see that, I'm going to try to lay out my case for why he's a bitch. If you're a J. Cole fan and you're upset by anything that I say, come at me. I don't give a shit. Okay, so the overarching thesis I have is that J. Cole is a bitch. But I'm not here to just slap charges on people without providing the evidence. So here's my plan. I'm going to first explain what I think of J. Cole's music. This might seem off topic, but it's honestly not. I think it's partly because people like me don't connect to his music, at least not in the same way that we connect to music by people like Kendrick or DMX or Tupac or Biggie and so on, that I think J. Cole gets all insecure and that's when his bitch assness shows. So it's all connected. But I will also lay out a thorough case for J. Cole being a bitch because based on his own actions and words. Look, I don't know J. Cole personally. I don't know who he is. I have no way to contact him. I don't have conversations with him. So I honestly, am not going to know a lot of details about his specific life. I don't listen to his all of his music anyways thoroughly enough to try to dissect what he's really about based off of the information he gives in the music. Plus, when it comes to music industry, a lot of it, how much of it is true, I have no idea. Right? I have no desire to get to know him personally. I honestly could care less. I'm mainly using him as an example of someone who's a bitch that others don't seem to see that that person is a bitch. And I think he serves as a good example of that. Um, but because I don't know him like personally, it wouldn't be fair to make accusations based off of any speculation or impressions that I have of him. I'm going to go strictly based off of what he has made available in the public eye, namely his music, specifically the lyrics, sometimes his interviews. Uh, does that mean that I have J. Cole pegged like correctly? Like I know exactly who he really is? Hell no, right? I don't know. Maybe he just presents himself in certain ways that I see as a pretty bitch thing to do. And maybe he's just a completely different person in real life. But I'll be honest with you. I personally don't care, right? Because if that's what he puts out into the public, whether or not he's really like that, that's still that's still what a bitch would do. Okay, because only a bitch would present themselves to the world as a bitch, and that's essentially what I'm going to argue that he's doing. Okay, enough of talking about what I'm going to do. Let me just get on with it. All right. So if you're like me, you're not a fan of J. Cole. I mean, let's be honest. We're not all going to be fans of the same artists. We're different people and connect to different music and different artists. So this doesn't seem like a big deal, but I want to explain why I'm not a fan. Because here's the thing, as a genuine fan of hip hop, as someone who kind of grew up listening and connecting to hip hop deeply, where it's very personal to me, I think I can provide at least some insight as to why some hip hop fans, not all, but some, don't really hold J. Cole in high esteem, even though we might respect him to some degree. Look, here's what's obvious to me. J. Cole is a good lyricist. No, I think probably a more accurate be he's a great one. He's a great lyricist. He's up there and putting words together in clever, thoughtful ways in the same realm. Maybe not quite the same, but in the same realm as like an Eminem or a Lil Wayne. I'll come back to Lil Wayne in a bit. I don't think there should be any doubts about that in terms of his lyrical ability. So there's always some level of respect for J. Cole because of his pen. I don't have any reason also to doubt that he's writing his own stuff. Like there's never been like accusations or, rumors floating around about, his having ghostwriters and so on. So I genuinely respect him for what he's able to do in this regard. Okay. But there are two primary reasons that I don't really like J. Cole's music. And it will actually blend into why I don't like J. Cole as a person, at least the kind of person that he presents him to be. For one, it's just a sonic thing. Like I just in terms of like sonically, I just don't find him to be particularly interesting. His flows are fairly similar from one song to another. There's very little variance in the way that he raps. And I also don't like most of the beats that he raps over. Like a lot of the beats, I mean, they're not bad, but they're also not particularly interesting or, something innovative. Look, everyone is entitled to what they enjoy when they're listening to music, and J. Cole just isn't that for me, right? And that's fine. I like a lot of music that other people don't like sonically. Like I've had conversations with friends about our differences, and sometimes we just don't see eye to eye on these things, and that's perfectly fine. But it's also fine acknowledging that some sounds that I like just might not hit the same way for others, and that's not a biggie, no big deal. Okay, so one is just a personal preference thing. Not a huge fan of sound. Don't find it to be particularly interesting. Um, it is what it is. The other reason, though, and I think this one might hurt J. Cole's feelings if I spoke to him directly, I personally don't find anything compelling about the content of his raps, about what he actually has to say, right? And as somebody who, prides himself as being a lyricist, I'm guessing this probably matters to him in how people take in what he has to actually say, whether they listen to or are impacted by what he has to say. There's a reason I don't connect to his music. He raps about more or less the same shit that everyone else raps about, sprinkled in with a few raps about that I think are meant to be profound, but they really aren't all that profound. There's no real depth to his music. It's surface level shit in the stuff he talks about. It just shows that he doesn't have much depth, I think, himself in understanding himself, his life, and what he has to share about any of the topics, honestly, that he raps about. Let me try to explain my lack of enthusiasm for J. Cole by comparing him to other rappers who can put lyrics together well but lack depth in the way that I'm describing J. Cole. I personally think a good comparison for J. Cole is Big Sean, right? Look, I like Big Sean's rapping, right? He can rap, right? He can string together rhymes and so on. He could be clever at times, catchy, but he doesn't rap about anything that really moves me in any way. It's not that I don't connect with his specific experience. It's that his raps don't give me much to connect to, right? My feelings are not moved in that way by people rapping about stuff. I connect to feelings that are expressed through the raps, right? Another good example of this in the same realm, I think, would be Lil Wayne. I told you I was going to come back to him. I never liked Lil Wayne. I know that when when Lil Wayne was getting big, a lot of the people were really big on Lil Wayne. These were my fairly formative years. So you would think that if I liked hip hop, I might be inclined to like Lil Wayne, but I didn't. And I didn't mostly because of the stuff he rapped about, right? Most of the stuff he rapped about, just I didn't connect to. I mean, honestly, 80% of his raps were about, I think, pussy and money, and not much else, right? Like the concepts of his raps didn't really move too far beyond that, right? Now, is J. Cole like Lil Wayne in this respect? No. Like he tries to move into, like J. Cole tries to move into more thoughtful spaces, I think. I just think he sucks at it, right? Not because he's not a good rapper, but I sense that he hasn't done any deep introspection on his own feelings. And here's the thing, when you don't connect with your own feelings and put that into the music, right? That sort of authenticity of what it is that you've experienced, not just in describing it, but like how it actually mattered to you, right? The way that it moved and impacted you, then the audience won't connect with it either. If you listened at all to my series on vulnerability, this was a series that I had where I was trying to kind of give an example to students, because I've worked with students a lot on their personal statements for their college applications. One of the things I've really struggled with them on is trying to get them to put not just their experience, describing it, reporting what they experienced, but rather talking more deeply about how it actually impacted them, right? What it actually meant for them. Expressing the depth of those experience by talking more personally about what it really meant for them, right? And, you know, I think that's essentially what J. Cole lacks, right? He lacks the ability to talk about himself deeply, something you can only do well, I think, if you've really grappled with what it is that these experiences meant to you, right? How it really impacted you even to this day, right? Dealing with the emotional aftermath of having these sorts of experience. Look, I'll give you an example from J. Cole's own song, Role Models. This is one of his bigger songs. This song could have been a deep song about not having role models and how that impacted him. But instead, I think you get a lot of this self-report. Like I'm trying to make this distinction so that you can see clearly what's actually happening, right? He talks in the beginning about, again, self-report of not having role model except maybe like Uncle Phil on TV. This is from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I loved that show growing up. Then he speaks of having sex, then talks about how he got defensive when the girl he was having sex with or something said he was spoiled and rich. And then he ends with how he wants real love, but how he's all promiscuous and doesn't think twice about it because the women deserve it. None of this reflects real introspection to me, right? Maybe you might think this is deep, but if you think that, then I think that you probably need to do some real introspection because there's no depth here, right? Real introspection for me might involve something about how, not having a role model impacted his relationship with women. J. Cole, I don't know, maybe you think that he inferred it, but he never actually makes any real connection there. If there is even any, I don't even know if he sees a connection there. Or maybe he could talk about why he got so defensive, when this girl said you were rich and spoiled. But again, he doesn't. He just reports that he did get defensive without any real introspection as to why he got defensive when she said that, right? Even when he talks about how he wants real love, like the one he saw on TV with Aunt Viv, he doesn't speak on why then he is having all these one-night stands instead, right? Seems like a pretty obvious place to talk more deeply about the topic, but this is kind of what you get regularly from J. Cole. You get topics that could be deep if you were to kind of expand upon it, dive a little deeper, right? The topics are generally things that people consider to be, thoughtful, introspective kind of stuff. But he doesn't actually speak on it with any depth, at least not for me. I don't see it. He does a lot of self-reporting. That's really what he does. He does a lot of self-reporting on how he feels without ever exploring why he feels that way. Like, what experience really led to his reacting the way that he does in certain situations. It's, for me, fake introspection. It's faux depth, right? Which is why I'm not surprised that his music doesn't connect with me. Like, I have a good sense of why I don't connect with his music. It's because of this, right? People connect with music in a deeper way when the artist shares a real piece of their soul in their music, right? When they could be real, raw, and vulnerable. I have a sense that to some degree, this is why people are drawn to figures like Billie Eilish. Her music tends to move in that direction quite a bit. Not so much Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift doesn't seem to have much of that depth. You can't do this sort of work in rap songs just by merely self-reporting. Like you can't connect to people in a deeper way just by merely self-reporting. Just sharing what happened or what you experience is not necessarily going to be in and of itself enough, I think. You need to actually be vulnerable if you really want to connect in some deeper way, right? Or if you're not going to do that, that's fine. I mean, there's a large space in hip hop for things that are not that. So if you're not going to do that, then that's fine. But just make sure then that at least your beats slap, right? That they could go hard in a club. Like, go in one direction or the other, or maybe you could find a way to, bring the two together. But you got to have one or the other for me to actually care about your music. Now, I don't know all of J. Cole's catalog in depth. I'm not a J. Cole fan, so I don't go around listening to all of his albums and try to decipher exactly what he's saying in every single one of them. So maybe there's moments where he does show some real depth. Uh, you know, maybe there's some songs that I'm not familiar with, but I've heard a lot of J. Cole. So, it's not as if I don't listen to any J. Cole. I've tried to listen and understand where J. Cole fans are coming from. And from what I've heard, most of it is just what I've described, right? It's a bunch of bars about how you know, how he's gone through some stuff or think ideas that he has or things that he believes without really the deeper, personal connection that makes a listener want to connect with him in some deeper way. And then, of course, like there's a lot of bars that he throws around about how he wants to be the best or that he should be seen as the best or how he's going to smoke all these other MCs. He does a lot of that. We're going to come back to this because I think J. Cole's very confused. Look, I'm not saying all this to shit on J. Cole. I'm saying this to explain exactly why I don't connect with his music, even though I respect his lyricism. I think a lot of people feel how I feel, but might not have been able to put their finger on it. And this is part of what's so confusing, right? It's like, because of his lyricism, you think like, oh yeah, so he's very, very good. But then when you listen to his music, you might find yourself not really connecting with his music and you're like, what the fuck is going on? I'm trying to give you an explanation, at least for me, why I see myself not connecting with his music. Maybe this explanation might help you better understand why you don't vibe with Cole. Okay. What does all this have to do with J. Cole being a bitch? I'm going to need to take one step back before we get into this, because I think maybe there might be some areas of misunderstanding, specifically on how I'm using the term bitch. Look, if you've been following this series up till now, you'll know what I'm talking about, right? I might not be using the word bitch in the same way that you are. I'm using this term to say that J. Cole is a child in a grown man's body. That for me is a bitch. It's someone who hasn't matured, someone who hasn't faced their demons and now has a deeper understanding and acceptance of themselves. It's actually a bitch of someone who just hides behind a facade because they haven't bothered to truly get to know themselves or to acknowledge who they truly are, right? It has to do with growth. Like that's really what it has to do with, right? A boy that's still a boy is not a bitch. It's just a boy, right? A grown adult that is really a boy inside that hasn't actually grown up, that's a bitch to me, right? That's what a bitch is to me. And J. Cole fits that mold, I think, very well. And I want to talk about it because for some reason, others don't seem to see that J. Cole fits this description. Look, there's honestly a lot of evidence I could point to that I can give of J. Cole's bitch assness. If you actually listen to some of his interviews after having heard some of the things that he's referencing in those interviews, where he sneak disses or insults or references some other rapper, but then in an interview says like, oh no, I actually wasn't like dissing them. I wasn't talking down on them. It's like all that bullshit gaslighting. That's some bitch shit. And, like, I could talk, for hours about that. And I could also go through a range of his lyrics from multiple songs to try to uncover exactly where I see him being a bitch. But I want to use Port Antonio because I think that was a kind of like a prime example of his bitch assness. Let me first say this, right? I personally have no issue with J. Cole dropping out of the rap battle with Kendrick. When he apologized, I actually had no problem with that either, right? Like, would it have been better if he didn't put out a diss track that he later recanted? Yes. But given that he already had put it out there, I didn't give him any shit for dropping out of the rap battle because acknowledging who you are, knowing that that wasn't right with your spirit, none of this is bitch shit. Like that's grown man shit, right? Like taking responsibility for your actions. That's what grown men do, right? It shows a willingness to acknowledge mistakes and to grow from them. Like I also didn't think of him as a bitch at all for, that moment because I honestly don't, maybe it's because I just didn't pay all that much attention to Cole, right? Like I said, I wasn't really a fan of his music. I tried listening to some of the stuff because people have held some of his albums in high regard. I listened to it, listened to his features, didn't really pay much mind. So why would I waste mental energy on him, right? So I didn't really think of him as a bitch all that much mainly because I didn't really think of him at all, right? But I'm turning to Port Antonio because I think it wasn't until Port Antonio that I realized I need to actually pay attention because it became very, very evident for me in his song, in that track, that he was a bitch. And anybody who thought otherwise, I thought was just plain wrong, right? I think they just got J. Cole wrong. But it actually was really helpful because it helped me to make better sense of everything else in his past work. That helped me to also better understand why it is that I wasn't particularly a fan of his, his work in the past. So, what exactly did Port Antonio reveal to me? I'm gonna just skip over the first verse because it's more of the same old J. Cole. So you can just rewind this, this podcast a few minutes to figure out how I felt about it because it's just more of the same J. Cole stuff. It's really on the second verse that you see the bitch come out. He begins as he did in so much of Middle Child, if you remember that popular track. That he claims to be great. Okay. I want to be clear about something, okay? Once you walk away from the rap battle, you can't claim to be great. Look, part of growing the fuck up is acknowledging your place, being honest with yourself. And you, J. Cole, no one else, you stepped away from any debates about being great or the greatest when you dropped out of the battle. You need to own that shit. Okay? That's what a real man does, right? Grown men own their shit. They hold themselves accountable. Okay? Own the choices you make. And when you don't, then you're a bitch. And that's exactly what you did here. You claim to be great and you didn't want to compete with the greats. Like you don't want to go ahead and go toe to toe with the best of them. And so at the end of the day, then that's it. Your claims of being great are over. Done. Finito. The end. Like, this wasn't anyone making any decisions for you or projecting anything on you. You chose to step out of the ring after years of claiming you were the greatest. About how solid your pen was, how you could go toe to toe with everybody else, how you'd be killing it. And when you had your chance to show it, you stepped away. That was your choice. You need to own that decision, which means, in the least, you cannot rap about being the best ever again, period. You seem to be confused about what happened. Everyone else sees it clearly. You were talking the big talk, which you're allowed to do. But then when it came time to back up all that big talk, you stepped away, which you're allowed to do. Again, I have no problem with your doing it. But if you're going to do that, you need to see what comes with that choice. All these bars about being the best needed to have stopped yesterday, right? You bitch, you did this to yourself. Hold yourself accountable like a fucking man. Later on in the song, you start pointing the finger everywhere else but yourself. Like, again, this is like a kid who's not wanting to take accountability for their decisions. That's what it looks like to me. That's bitch shit, okay? Look, here I'm quoting here, right? This is what J. Cole says, right? They instigate the fuckery because it's profitable. No, motherfucker. No one instigated shit except maybe you. You're the one that said on first person shooter, and I quote here, "We the big three, like we started a league, but right now I feel like Muhammad Ali." And then when Kendrick came back with, "Fuck the big three, it's just big me," you didn't have to drop a diss track. You could have just kept your mouth shut and kept it moving. No one was instigating shit. You jumped out on your own accord. Oh, what? You were pressured by people around you to respond? Well, then don't be a bitch and stand on your own feet like a man. Do what's right for you from the very beginning. But here's the thing. Once you make the decision to pop out like that, you own it, right? Don't blame other people for pressuring you or for wanting this. or for gassing you up. Look, no, own your own decisions. Only bitches make excuses for the decisions they make. You bitch. Oh, here's some more lyrics later on in that song. J. Cole speaking here, right? I pulled the plug because I've seen where this was about to go. They wanted blood, they wanted clicks to make their pockets grow. Motherfucker keeps pointing the finger at others and making excuses for himself. Like, what the hell is this? This is bitch shit. You bitch. Who the fuck cares what others wanted? You make your own decisions. Are you not your own man? Like, I don't understand this, right? Other people could pressure you. Other people could want certain things from you. Other people can demand things from you. But your decisions are your own. Why aren't you owning up to your own shit? Like, I just don't get it. That's bitch shit to me. Some more lyrics for you, right? I wouldn't have lost a battle dog. I would have lost a bro. What the fuck are you talking about? You can try to spin this shit however you want. Maybe your fans could try to spin this shit however they want. But you know exactly what the fuck you're trying to say. You're trying to say that you wouldn't have lost a battle if you stayed in it. And you just bowed out because you didn't want to lose a friendship. Okay? What the fuck kind of gaslighting shit is this? Look, you're just sucked. Period. 7-minute drill, mid at best. You want to argue with me about this? We can have a whole long conversation about, like, you know, analyzing diss tracks. This was not it. Okay? Everything you've shown me, you were going to get, everything you showed me that you were going to get your ass whooped. That's what you showed me based off of this track. Okay? Maybe you did bow out because you didn't want to get involved in something ugly. That's fine. But again, you own your decisions, you bitch. Stop trying to make excuses for them or wiggle your way out of accepting responsibility for your decisions. Part of what comes with your decision is that you can't be seen as the better MC. It's the way I feel about Mayweather. I don't know if anybody else feels this way, right? But I always felt like Floyd Mayweather always tried to duck fights for as long as he can until he got the upper hand. I think this is what he did with Pacquiao, to be honest, right? That's some bitch shit, okay? Jeez Louise. It didn't have to be ugly and you didn't have to lose a friend. Like, let's be honest. That battle, it didn't have to go that way. I'll talk more about this a little bit, okay? If that means I got to dig up dirt and pay the whole team of algorithm bot ninjas to sway the whole thing on social media, competing for your favorable means, like, this is you, J. Cole, talking all kinds of crazy nonsense, okay? You bitch. Let me explain something to you that your immature ass doesn't seem to get. You seem to think that you need all these things to win a rap battle. You're the one saying it, so it's you. Don't be throwing mud on others when you weren't willing to fight. Look, here's the analogy. That's like someone who ducks out of a fight and then talks shit about the ones who are fighting in front of them and how dirty they fight. You bitch, don't have any grounds to speak on this shit when you couldn't put your money where your mouth was, you bitch. Like, you didn't even get in the ring. You don't have a say in this stuff, okay? You can't talk about the fight or how dirty it is or, like, whether or not what people are doing. Like, don't comment on this shit if you had the opportunity to be in the fight but then chose not to be in it, okay? J. Cole again. Now, some will discredit me, try wipe away my pedigree, but please find a ninja out that's rapping this incredibly. Again, you dumb bitch. You discredited yourself. That's what you did. Take some fucking responsibility for your decisions. I didn't fault you for stepping out of the rap battle, but your inability to accept responsibility for that decision, right? That's what makes you a bitch. Plain and simple. Okay? You don't get to say you're the best when you won't fight the best. That's a coward, right? That's a coward that doesn't believe all the hype that he himself spews. You can't talk tough shit about being the best and not be willing to go toe-to-toe with the best. Rap battles don't have to be ugly mudslinging, so stop using that shit as an excuse. Look, after the whole thing with Drake and Kendrick, rap, we saw from like Joey Badass and Ray Vaughn and Daylight and all these others that you can have a friendly spar to see who's the best, and it doesn't have to go down that route of going ugly, right? It went sideways with Drake and Kendrick, but that was only because Drake tapped into his true bitch form and started launching accusations about Kendrick and his family. But you didn't have to do any of that. You did not have to engage in any mudslinging. You just decided not to engage at all. Again, that's fine. Like, look, nobody is faulting you for stepping out of the battle, but then you need to own the consequences of that, which is that you now no longer get to make any claims about being the best. You put yourself in that spot, no one else. If anybody tries to argue with me on this point, you don't know anything about hip hop. Like, I'm going to stand on that shit, okay? Rap battles don't have to be nasty and ugly. It could get that way. We've had history of some of it going sideways in that way. But there's a lot of rap battles where people are able to be fine afterwards. Okay? But here's the thing. Like, you cannot say, I'm going to bow out of it and then still continue to talk the big talk. That's double speak. That's what it feels like, right? Look, because you did this to yourself and continue to refuse to take responsibility for it, like you did again in Bronx Zoo later on, okay? Your words ring hollow when you say shit like, reminding these folks why we did it. It's not for beefing, it's for speaking out thoughts, pushing ourselves, reaching the charts, reaching our minds, deep in our hearts, screaming to find emotions to, what is it? Something that does open you up, help you cope with the rough times and shit. Like, look, you ain't done shit to touch any hearts open shit up, okay? If you were really about that, you'd shut the fuck up about being the best and just focus on impacting people in this meaningful way. I get the sense that you're a confused little child. You're trying to present yourself as someone that is about love and peace and becoming a better version of yourself, but your words and actions honestly say otherwise. If you're really about what you say, then stand on it and focus on spreading that love and peace. Stop opening up your bitch-ass mouth about being the best. I have no problem with you doing one or the other. It's you who seems to want to have it both ways. You seem to want to puff out your chest, be all braggadocious, and then claim that you're not really about that, but rather about inspiring others. It's your raps. Like, it's not mine. It's your raps. It's your words. You can't have it both ways. You're fucking confused yourself, right? Which one are you really about? Because from what I see in your music, I see someone who just doesn't know himself, hasn't accepted that they are who they are, right? Like, look, you could go ahead and brag all you want. Just stand on it. Or you could say like, hey, I don't really care about that kind of stuff. I care more about, uplifting people or bringing peace and, opening up minds and hearts. Then focus on that, okay? You want to try to do both? You can try, but right now it honestly feels like you're a confused child that is being pulled in two different directions and don't know which way they want to go. They want to have it both ways, okay? And these things don't fit together. More than anything, instead of figuring yourself out, you're out here pointing fingers at other people and then accusing, in a sly bitch-ass way, that other people are engaging in some shady mudslinging type shit. Bitch, take some responsibility. Do some real introspection. Here's some suggestions. Based on what I've seen from you, J. Cole, here's some suggestions. Because this is what I see. You're inauthentic. So let's start there and find out why. Right? You seem to be very focused on how others see you instead of who you truly are, which would explain why you're inauthentic. So I think this is like a good place to start. You seem to still crave validation from others to be seen as a best instead of just doing and actually being your best. That's some bitch shit to be so overly focused on what other people think of you. Figure out why the fuck you crave that validation, right? Are you insecure? Like, were you not loved enough as a kid? Like, I don't know your life. You need to figure that shit out for yourself. What I can tell you is I see all that insecurity just oozing out of you. What I can tell you is this. As long as you keep avoiding looking in the fucking mirror and asking yourself why you're saying and doing the shit that you're doing, you're going to continue avoiding responsibility, trying to present yourself as something you're not, and just continue being a bitch the way that you've been acting the last couple of years, and honestly longer. It's time to grow the fuck up. And I know that doesn't happen overnight. It takes years of working on yourself. Trust me, I'm speaking from personal experience. Okay. But it seems, based off of what I've seen, that this is not what you're doing. At least it's not showing in your music. So I'm going to make a prediction. The fall off, your next album, is going to be more of this bitch assness spewing out of your mouth. I have no interest in listening to any more of this bitch assatry. So fuck your album. Until you show up as a grown man, I won't be listening to any more of your bitch music.